Would you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'm Katrine Vestergaard Brandstrup, and I'm a loom researcher. I call myself. It's not an academic title, but I research in looms at the Center for Textile Research at Copenhagen University.
Yeah. And thank you for the really nice lecture you just gave. It was really interesting. So one of the things I was thinking about while you were speaking, when you presented Husflidsvæven, you wrote very much. You wrote this about alle fine damer skal lære at væve, all like nice ladies, and because this is something that I have not found much about. Whether the loom was the Husflidsvæven and La Cour and Sigumfeld's courses, were they very class focused, or because earlier I showed you the book from Engeström, van Engeström, and I read from Gertrud Granander that salonvæv, that was in the upper class homes in urban areas in Sweden. And so I was just wondering, when you told about it, was it a bit the same with the Husflidsvæv? Do you know that?
I think it was probably something that I interpreted in the time, looking from nowadays and down to that period, because I think that the audience or the people who attended these courses were actually common girls from the countryside. But of course, the whole højskole, folk high school movement had some target groups, and there was a level of education at this time, and Jenny La Cour and you had Hanne Sigumfeld. They were like ladies not from the upper class, but they were ladies from families with money, so to say. It could be like the local priest family, or it could be like other folk high school teachers, leaders of the cultural classes, so to say, at this time.
Undskyld, jeg tror, den er ud fra bordet, så vi vil gå ind i. Så det vil godt risikere, at det du lige sagde ikke vil kunne bruges på podcastdelen, fordi man hører det overraskende meget. Beklager.
Så hvor langt tilbage?
Ja.
Det hele?
Det var det med, om det var upper class.
Ja.
Beklager.
Ja, try again.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of the ladies who attended these courses were from the countryside, were normal girls from the countryside, but the ladies who actually then educated in being weaving teachers, and ladies like Jenny La Cour and Johanna Sigumfeld, they were kind of like an upper class, and from the folk high school elite, so to say, the cultural elite at this time. So I think they themselves thought that they were like making a lot of normal people interested in weaving and educating them, but actually I don't think that it was for everybody.
No. But do you think, was there then how is your perspective on in the end of the 19th century, was the people who came from the weaving school, did they go home to weave, or what did they do with the skill?
I haven't really tested that all around, but I have met some names in other archives on ladies who were on these courses, And I think that it was a mixture of, some of them actually took the skills with them and taught them on other schools.
Folk high schools.
Yeah, other folk high schools, and some of them just went home and did it for own pleasure. But I think some of them also like tried to not make a living of it, because I don't believe that they could. When we get 20-30 years in the 20th century, some of them actually had a more longer education. There was this Paula Trox Askovhus, where she actually educated women in having handcraft weaving as a living, so to say. But I think the first generations, they went home and did it for own pleasure. And perhaps sometimes they used a bit more than just their spare time on weaving, and was actually skilled at it, and perhaps sometimes they produced so much that they sold some of it, or used it as gift for families and relatives, and produced nice things, so to say. But
But is it then first really with Paula Trox that it becomes a weaving teacher education, or?
I'm not sure that she actually. It was not teachers she educated. It was weavers. So the skills were actually to make designs and invent new designs, and some of the heritage from Paula Trox, that is, for instance, Hanne Vedel in Spinnegården in Aabenraa today. She actually was a skilled designer who then, from her hand weaving, designed new things that the textile industry produced. So I think that was probably more Paula Trox's idea. I haven't really thought of where the teachers, the weaving teachers, were educated, but I think, it must have been like a movement that started in Jenny Lacour's courses. But there must also have been other places who developed into teaching, weaving teachers education. I think that a place like Kerteminde, Husholdningsskole, that was actually also a couple of a head couple from Askov Højskole who moved from Askov to Kerteminde. That was probably where the formal education for weaving teachers got developed, so to say.
And when are we here in time? Like around?
I think we are in like the 1950s. 60s.
So late.
Yeah, but I'm not quite sure, I must say. I have to look it up.
Because I can't completely point to the source where I think I know this from, but I have this idea that I read somewhere that one of the big changes with Jenny Lacour and
Johannes Sigumfeldt,
that hand weaving teaching became one of the first professions that a woman could have, so that she kind of could be independent, get an independent income. And that was also one of the reasons why it was so attractive. But maybe I just feel that I read it somewhere, but it's not something you have come across.
No. I think in my history lessons, I would say that one of the first female employments were like the school teachers from the small children. That was a huge thing in the beginning of the 1900s, where they educated these primary school teachers, so to say, that were all women for the first and second grade. And the most of them actually also taught in normal handicraft. Both in the primary school, but also when the children came in like the secondary school or the main school, so to say, when they came in the 3rd and 4th grade. So I'm not sure that weaving actually was just, I think weaving could be one of the many textile craft håndarbejds where they were teachers.
Yeah. Because another thing I also read was, and again I don't remember the source, but in southern Jutland, in Sønderjylland, I read somewhere that for a woman it was better to not get married than to marry underclass. So that was why many women made a profession with kniplinger, and because that was how they could make a living. But then to not have to marry with somebody who was not fine enough.
Probably.
Må jeg indskyde lidt? Jeg synes, vi også skulle bruge tiden rigtig meget på det lokale. Fordi det der, hvor du kan noget helt særligt om den der kontekst rundt om det, vi ligesom har slået ned i. Vi har ligesom fundet sådan en masse specifikke ting og teorier omkring det, og det har været lidt fedt at få sådan bundet nogle sløjfer rundt omkring en lidt større sammenhæng. Hvor vi snakker for eksempel om det her med Lervad, og hvad var hans baggrund og hans forbindelse til højskolen, og hvordan han så måske kan have mødt Meta Rosenberg, for det er noget af det, vi har snakket om. Hvordan fanden har de egentlig mødt hinanden? Er det bare fordi alle, der var inden for noget med væv, de selvfølgelig kendte Lervad?
Eller har hun været student eller studerende hos Jenny Lacour?
Kunne hun have holdt et kursus, fordi hun havde tynd og væveskole, så for den der sådan, lokale sammenhæng belyst, tror jeg, det er rigtig fedt.
Ja, det er en god idé.
Og netop gå ind i noget af den der helt særlige specialviden, du har om det her med Lervadvævene. Nu hvor vi har chancen.
But actually there was one question that we talked about when we saw your presentation. So in all of the old catalogs, like that you also showed, so we have then this Skovrider Rusthøjs loom with an image in the beginning of each catalog. But then the loom that is depicted, loom 1 and 2, I think, or 2 and 3, the Husflidsvæven, it looks different. So was that just Jenny Lacour's own loom from Skovrider Rusthøj? And then the looms in the catalogs are then the interpretation made by Lervad.
Exactly. In Jenny Lacour's weaving book, the book she eventually wrote, the educational book, she has this picture of a husflidsvæv, and that is clearly not the one that Lervad produced. So I presume I must say that it is that book that Rusthøj made for the Great Nordic Exhibition in Copenhagen in 1888.
So that was not produced by...
Vi får noget af lyden, mens der er plastik. Vi har på en lige mens.
This one?
Yes.
Because the upper part of this one is also turned of Rusthøj, and in the catalogs it's flat with decoration.
Yes.
And Lervad's is maybe also a bit bigger, or not?
Well, I don't exactly know the scale of this, but Lervad, he made his looms in many different widths, so to say, so you could order whatever width you wanted to have. There was these nice pictures from that newest book of Mette Eriksen Hausten Mikkelsen, where she has some very good photographies of the first courses with Jenny Lacour, where you see the students in front of the house, and they have this small black loom, and I think that must be this same loom. So actually the looms that Lervad produced in their name was slightly different, and had some other details.
Yeah.
And they, I haven't. There are other pictures of those, so to say, but all the pictures you see in the Lervad catalogs are from the Lervad looms,
Yeah.
so to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm?
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you haven't really found out why this Skovrider Rosthøj why he started producing looms?
I'm very puzzled of
Yeah.
from where he got the idea,
Yeah.
both for the decorative, like wood-turned posts, and also actually how the frames, the gables are constructed, because it has this middle post that is unusual in the older looms.
Yeah.
So I'm really puzzled of exactly where he got the inspiration from and where he had seen something like this before. And I haven't really researched that much into it, but it could be nice to, if there's any archives belonging to Rosthøj, Overmandens Husflidsskole at one point, to like dig into that story to see if we could track where the inspiration is from.
Yeah.
Because they don't have that in Sweden.
No.
In the Swedish Vævmuseum either, the Klemborgers Vævmuseum, they haven't got that type.
No.
So
it seems all the Swedish looms are heavier.
Yeah.
Also if they build a smaller loom, it's still heavy.
It's still heavier.
That's really interesting. And what do you think there with with Meta Rosenberg? As far as I know, she so I know that she was a nurse, and she was serving as a nurse during the First World War, and her brother was fighting. He was a soldier, and I talked with Dølstrup Lokalarkiv, and she said that many women from southern Jutland went down to Germany as nurses to be closer somehow to relatives. And so my hypothesis is that she somehow has gotten to know about these little frame looms that I showed you earlier, maybe Kircher. I think that was the first one gets launched in 1926. And I think she knew about Spjelvæv, and I think there are other, because of the assignment you sent me. So there are other examples, but I find it really weird that she's not mentioned anywhere, because the Turner frame loom, it has been so popular, it's so easy to get still, also the old version, and I think it puzzles me that she's not mentioned anywhere. Do you think that can have something to do with the German connection, or that it has been a bit itchy, or have you come across something about her? And now I was thinking whether she could have taken a course at by Jenny Lacour and Johannes Sigumfeld, but then we also found one of the order books from 24, where there was a weaving in vævestue i Tønder. Maybe she could also. I don't know if you have any thoughts. That was many questions.
No, I really don't know where the connection between Anders Lervad, or was it Harald Lervad?
It's probably been Harald.
Harald Lervad. I don't really know how those were acquainted, but I think that it was a very, very small milieu at that time, a very, very small, so everybody knew everybody. And this, of course, there is this element that if she's original was from Tønder, she had to have been at the German part until the 1920s. Exactly. So it was not, the connection between Lervad and her could perhaps earliest have been established after 1920s. And yes, possible that she have been like knowing smaller looms from somewhere in Germany.
Yeah.
I think that would be a very plausible way to look at it. She could also have had a weaving education somewhere else in Germany.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be
A good
Danish
point.
at all.
No.
And at this time, there was another loom producer in south of Jutland at this time that I have come across.
No.
There is on the island of Als,
Yeah.
the old Danebod Højskole.
Yeah.
They also produced some looms, a series of Danebod looms that looks very much like one of those that Lervad produces. And there was the whole concept of Sønderjysk hjemmevæv.
No.
There was it was also after the reunion,
Yeah.
genforeningen in the 1920,
Yeah.
where there was a lot of Danish local feelings growing up in that part of Denmark.
Yeah.
I don't know if it could be any worth like to check if there was a connection between Danebod Højskole, Sønderjysk hjemmevæv and Meta Rosenberg, perhaps. I don't know.
Because the loom producer there, I didn't know this story.
No?
But Harald Lervad and Meta Rosenberg, they have a long correspondence because Meta Rosenberg feels that the frame loom has been copied by Snegermester Sonsing in Als.
Oh,
Yeah.
and but that's not the Ava because
Yeah, that's the Ava. And that was not Danebod.
No, I think that's a third company actually.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there is more than one, but I have to check again because the Danebod looms were actually also produced by a Snedker.
Yeah.
So I have to check whether there is any overlap.
Yeah.
But there is more stories to cover and more connections to be.
And especially around also this with the copying, because it comes, I think it's interesting what you say, that appears like maybe a copy of Lervad's, because then there is the example of Meta, and then there is also the example of Manimule, because apparently the same carpenter, he made a foldable, or like a loom that could be transformed into a table.
Yeah.
And there is a correspondence where the patent bureau contacts Lervad and says, we think you should look at this. And then he sends it to Manimule, and then they're like, so Lervad is really taking it down, and he's saying, this is just the most clumsy idea I've ever seen. I don't give a shit, but you can't use sammenklappelig. You can't use the word folded, because that can be interpreted as ours. So there has been really bad blood. With this Als thing.
Very interesting. I just now get an idea as we are talking, because one from the audience at the speak today, he was relative to an ancestor to the Lervad family, and he told me some stories that I didn't know of. He actually told me that there was also a kind of disagreement between Anders Lervad, the first generation, and Harald Lervad, that was the second generation, according to the Trisevæv. What are we call that countermarch?
Counterbalance.
Counterbalance loom and counter march looms. Because Anders wanted to like hold on to those counterbalanced Swedish looms, and he wanted like to sell them to Sweden. Actually, he thought there had to be like a market in Sweden for those looms. And Harald wanted more to make a business and make some large-scale production of looms, and he wanted to
cut it off,
hold on to the contramass looms and cut the counterbalance looms off, so to say. So I think that there have been, in that period where the generations shifted, there must have been something going on in the world and on this weaving scene. There must have been some things happening, and I start to see Harald as a very visionary loom producer. The generation who really had the big thoughts of looms, so to say, and I think that these these collaborations with Meta Rosenberg and also Mule Henningsen around the smaller looms, that this time they started to patentate their looms, because they discovered, if we don't take a patent of our developed looms, somebody else will take the scene and do it for us. So I think that there's something is happening in this period.
Kan vi etablere tidsmæssigt skiftet til, hvor Harald kommer ind? Hvornår begynder han at komme mere ind i forhold til, hvor Meta ligger? Tænker på, hvor interessant at få.
So Harald becomes part of the company, as far as I understand, in 1924.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly when this generation shifted, but it was in the 1920s. Where he actually grew up and grew into the company, I think, and we know from some private travel books and diaries that he was sent out on travels to Sweden and prepared for this shift, so to say, for some years. As far as I remember, I think it was the mother, Else Marie, that died in 1921 or 22, and at this phase they had to close down the school. They sideways with the loom producing and the other things that the company made for sale. They also had the sløjdskole, what should we call it, handicraft school, where they taught mainly young men every summer, and I think also in the winter time, in smaller crafts like bookbinding, and I think there was wood turning and basket weaving, something like that. And the concept, of course, was that the young men who joined these courses had to live at the school, so it was actually that they lived at the private home of the Anders and his wife's place, and the school could only go on with a woman in the house to cook for these young men. So at the point where she wasn't there anymore, they had to close down the school, the school part of it. And perhaps it was then after that they had to think of, okay, if we don't have the school part anymore, what should we do then? So to say, we have to perhaps scale up our carpenter production and the loom production and so on. But it's around 24, 25, I think that Harald definitely takes over.
Eller becomes part.
Becomes part.
That it becomes Lervad and Søn. Because then Meta Rosenberg, she launches the Turner frame loom in 33. And then the book is published, the first book is published in 35. And we didn't find the very old contracts.
No.
But we found a contract from 49, which is then renewed until 59, and she passes away in 58.
Ah.
But I think it's really interesting, this of kind of the renewal of the company. And I think also today when I visit weaving spaces in Sweden, it's primarily still counterbalance looms, where both in Denmark and Finland countermarch is not counterbalance, almost not anymore. And so I'm wondering also if he could really have, I don't know now, it was Anders that thought they could have produced counterbalance for Sweden, but maybe they could have made a market for countermarch, I don't know. Because I even hear it from weavers today, that they're like, wow, what a nice shed that is made, completely surprised. I think that's very interesting. And have you any thoughts about then with the small looms also that you showed images of their own production? I think it was it Asger Væv? Was it Asger Væv 10 and 11? The small table ones from 32.
That was the folded loom, I think.
Yeah.
In the later on, but there was these first small table looms, not the, what do you call it, vævramme? It's
frame loom.
You call it frame loom because in the catalogs that I had from the 80s, it's called a rigid heddle loom. Rigid heddle loom.
And I only call it a frame loom because Meta Rosenberg did.
Okay.
And so in that report you sent me, it says that like kind of term comes from German Webrahmen. And English loom frame. So they basically took it one-to-one to Danish. So it was called Tønder Vævramme, and I've also always called it a rigid heddle loom. And so that is a bit funny.
But there is a shift in language, and there's something happening in the 60s, 70s, I think, where some new terms are developing, especially in the English. I just now wonder if these rigid heddle loom, I think perhaps it could be in that NTT, the Nordic Textile Terminology, technical terminology, that was made by Margrethe Hall, Agne Scheier, and those. And it was in the 60s and 70s they made their huge work where they kind of tried to establish one language for textile terms, and they had this connection to the CETA in France, and it could be that that's where these terms have like been pointed down, so to say, and Webrahmen, loom frame are older constructions, so to say. What was your question again?
So I was thinking if you have any thoughts about, because those images you showed were from around 32. And so do you have any thoughts about what happened there? This is also around Meta Rosenberg's time, with this scaling down. And
it was the small looms,
Was that because of the social reform, do you think, or do you think there were other tendencies happening that made the scale down really a focus? Because I hadn't seen those images you showed today.
No?
No. I didn't know that they made these table looms also.
But I think it's because you're missing that 32, 35 catalog.
Yes.
Because they are in there.
And this therapy
idea. Without again having like been researching this to the deepest, I believe that it is associated with this undskyld, aftenskole.
Evening school.
Evening.
School
I believe is associated with this evening school thing that is getting introduced in Denmark at this time. I think that it must be kind of a development of the old folk high school's idea that evening courses has to be put out so all normal people, all workers have the possibility to educate themselves in their spare times, so to say. And there is really a huge market for new kinds of courses at this point, where the folk high schools are places where you go in a time period and stay there and live there, and it's more like a long summer vacation or something like that. These evening courses are put up all over in the larger cities and also in smaller administrative places in Denmark. So it's really nice, it's really easy to make use of for everybody, and you can join them and take a lecture every week, so to say, in your spare time. So I think that this also must have been a special need of a new type of looms for these courses, because I think in the beginning everybody took their own loom to the course, and nobody was able to travel around with the huge large looms that was in the established loom schools, in the folk high schools. So I have heard stories that people actually took the folded looms on their bike and went to these evening classes. And the small loom frames, of course, were so easy. And as we know, Flemming has this backpack where you could put it in and take it on your shoulders and go to your evening class with it. So I think that must also have been really, really huge shift in accessibility of doing crafts and learning these things. And still it was mostly women who attended the evening classes in weaving. And of course I think these smaller looms must also have been more affordable. The larger looms were an investment. And the larger loom, if you had a large house or lived in the countryside at a farmstead or something like that, you could probably find a space for a larger loom. But these small looms, if you lived in an apartment in the city, they were also more doable for
more modern, fitting the modern home.
You could pack it away and put it in the corner when you had to use the table for dining or something else. So I think, but exactly where this starts and from what idea, I don't know, and I think it's very interesting, and it must have been, it must have been on the way for quite some time. It must have been some ideas that have been started other places also. The small table looms, both the loom frames, but also the other small table looms that Lervad invents, so to say. There's this one with the small handles that is now called a tangent loom. Is that also the English word, tangent loom?
I think it is. Does one call it like a key? I'm not sure.
No, I'm not sure.
No.
Maybe key loom.
Tangent, handle loom. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we have to
look
find
up
that.
the term.
Look up the term.
I
Yeah.
call Susanne.
Yeah. Yeah, if she knows, I don't know. But these small tangent looms where they had handles in the start, and there are also the other version where it's like a roll,
Yeah.
and that's only for like 2 shats.
Yeah.
So it's one up, one down.
Yeah. with this.
And it's easier, yes, where you can shift it like that.
Yeah.
So these looms, they can be on a table, yeah, but they are smaller, and you don't have to use your feet. There are no treadles on the loom, so actually they are easier for disabled people, handicapped people to operate.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is something that is developed from the First World War, where so many soldiers were injured. It could be perhaps that somebody in a hospital thought of, okay, these poor soldiers that are sitting there and doing nothing, we have to give them some therapy. It's always good to do something with your hands. I think that this knowledge of how good it is to do something with your hands, to create something with your hands, we are talking it about nowadays also, craft psychology. I think that it's something that have been popping up again and again and again in history, and it was also one of the things that the ideas in the husflidsbevægelse, that there was so many young people in the countryside in the beginning of the 1900 and the middle of the 1900 that was unemployed because the machines came to the countryside and took over, and the young people were restless, and the machines did all the work, and they didn't know what to do after hours, after working day, and it was like they have to do something meaningful, they said in the husflidsbevægelsen. And to do something with your hands, it's both very nice for your health and your well-being, so to say. So both for your head and for your heart and for your body and for everything. So these thoughts were actually also the thoughts behind the husflidsbevægelsen in the 19th century, and it's some of the same thoughts that we have today with this digital world, with all the phones and screens and all of that. So today we also want everybody to turn it off, go analog and do something with the hands, because we can actually see that it's doing something good for the human well-being to do that. I don't know if that was a part of...
But I know that, in Paimio, in close to Turku, in Finland, there is one of Alvar Aalto's first big projects, and that was a tuberculosis hospital.
Yes.
And the whole architecture is built up around giving training the lungs and getting rest. And they had a weaving room because that trained that was not for production, but that was to get lung training. So I think it's not unlikely, honestly.
I think we could look into that period in the, was that in the 1910s, 1920s, 30s, where all this also with the mental health department got established in Denmark, with what is that called with nearby Vejle eller Fredericia? Hvad hedder de? Det der sanatorium, hvad hedder det? Sådan en åndssvage sanatorium. Hele det der udvikling af det der omsorgsåndssvage område, der tror jeg, der kunne ligge noget.
Ja, det er så interessant.
Special needs.
Therapy.
Therapy for special needs.
Yeah. That the disabled, the handicapped, the people who were underdeveloped, you know, they put like children that could not read in the schools, they were put off to like these special homes because they must have been like stupid or something like that. So I think that this idea of doing something with your hands is good for your health and good for development. I think that it started these places with those doctors, but we need the link, so to say.
Må jeg bryde ind, fordi jeg har lige 2 ting, jeg gerne vil have til noget tid. Det ene er, at det ville være helt vildt godt, hvis vi bare super kort lige kunne etablere, hvad det her evening courses er, for det bliver meget indforstået dansk.
Ja.
Bare sådan, det behøver ikke at være spor langt overhovedet. Nej. Det var den ene ting, og så den anden ting, jeg kom til at tænke på, sagde du ikke, at Meta Rosenberg, hun var sygeplejerske og skulle ned og hjælpe hendes bror i Tyskland?
Jo.
Kunne terapivæv-ideen være noget, der havde med det at gøre?
Det
at hun enten havde set det, men hvis vi ligesom lige kunne lave den kobling med hende, om hun kan have set det, eller om hun simpelthen fik ideen, eller om der kunne være et eller andet der.
Ja, men altså, så jeg har aldrig stødt på, Meta Rosenberg nævner det i forhold til terapi. Hun nævner det i forhold til den moderne bolig, men ikke i forhold til terapi overhovedet. Så, men jeg synes, det er interessant med de der, om hvis folk har været skadet, men jeg er nemlig ikke stødt på det i forhold til terapi med nogen af dem.
Men hun kunne også se det, brugt til terapi, og så tænkte, det er sgu da smart, så kan man have den derhjemme.
Ja, jamen det er rigtigt. Ja, og so one thing that I thought about connected to Germany was that I saw an exhibition with the works of the Bauhaus women a couple of years ago, and there was a pulling loom from the 30s as like a tangent. Yeah. And so I'm also just thinking if this is something Lervad has seen, or like this is not uncommon at that time, and that was this big as a beautiful piece. But maybe establishing this evening school, aftenskole concept. Yeah, do you want to try?
What was it? When did it start? Why would you want to start something like that?
I don't know
is
that much
free?
about
it. But just even the most basic, because if you're not from the Nordics, you probably have no idea what we mean.
So I know it from Manny Mule's book and Dinesen Jebsen, that in 1935 there was this evening school law which was part of a larger social reform in Denmark, and there was a particular emphasis on, I think exactly like you say, to build on the Folkehøjskole thought, to make knowledge available for common people. And there was a special emphasis on craft knowledge and weaving particular, that the politicians wanted to nourish old Danish crafts. And so anybody more than 3 people could apply to start a weaving, an evening school course anywhere. So if you could gather a group of people, then you could get state financing to establish a course in whatever, but particularly the old Danish crafts. That's how I understood it. And that makes weaving boom in Denmark, because you can get free education in weaving. And Meta Rosenberg travels around with her loom and teaches.
She was like a weaving kiosk.
Yeah, but it's a weaving kiosk. It's also how she formulates her ambitions around it. It's completely what I've been doing. So that's how I understood it from them, how they describe it. And then there is a book from 1957 from this Kirsten Gahn Andersen, where she's saying that they need more specific teaching material for the evening school courses that have gained so much success for the past 10-15 years, and that's what she's publishing then. So there it hasn't been enough, she thought, with the books that Meta Rosenberg has published and Manny Mule, and she says there needs more specific evening school material. And I think the thought at that time seems very similar to the Swedish study circles today, apart from that you have to have a teacher in the evening school, and you don't have that in the study circle. But this of like giving freedom to people to choose what they want to learn, and then that the state supports that.
And we still have the evening school concept in Denmark.
Yeah.
They are still all over Denmark. More than one choice to that, like put out different kinds of courses. For 20-25 years, the weaving courses have been not that common in the evening school udbud.
Yeah.
Offer in the evening school. For like the last 25 years, the weaving courses have not been like that common in the evening school offers. And if there was like courses in the evening schools, they were always booked up because it was the same women who like booked the places to get into a place where they could borrow a loom, so to say. So it have been like a very small, tight community, and many places the rooms, the facilities for these evening courses were like public schools and other libraries, and they didn't want to have looms standing around, so the looms were like either put in a corner or thrown out. And if there was some evening courses, it was usually a teacher who then had the facility in her own home, had a barn or something like that she had like rebuilt and put up like a loom space. But I believe that it's going to turn now. I see that more and more of these little weaving communities are getting stronger and stronger and bigger. I'm not sure that they are getting actually more evening school courses in weaving. We have to like find other ways to do this, because again, it's kind of equipment heavy to take a weaving course with the looms and all the extra things that is used for it, unless you do it on the small loom frames that are very easy to like put up and take down, and that's I think that's a very nice way to get the young generations, because a weaving frame is almost like a tablet or an iPhone. Is quick and it's easy, and you can just take it away when you don't want to use it anymore and do something very nice in a short time. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been talking about it like it's the laptop. If the jacquard loom is the start of the computer, then the weaving frame loom is the laptop.
Yeah.
But I like iPad.
But it was also interesting when we came across yesterday, because Julius Koch, they rented looms, like frame looms. Yeah. So you, if you wanted, you could rent minimum 5 at the time. By then.
What period was that?
Was that in the 30s, 40s?
I'm not sure.
There was in some brochure we found from there. It has been 30s, 40s, 50s. Yeah. Where there is this, where they say like what's possible by them. Yeah. So you can buy looms, you can buy equipment, and you can rent. But minimum 5 at the time.
It must have been in the 50s, because we found out when we were looking at the correspondence between Meta and like they were unhappy with the naming of the looms in Julius Koch's catalog.
Yeah, and that was the one. Yeah. It was like so like mid-end 50s that catalog was from. Yeah. I thought that was amazing, because it even adds a further layer here. Yeah. So if you're a teacher and you don't have the looms, you can rent it by them and have courses.
Yeah.
Jeg tænker, vi er lidt sådan smart som
Hvad er klokken?
Jeg ved det ikke, fordi det kan jeg ikke tjekke, når telefonen optager.
Jeg er måske smidt ud også, Ja, den er 10 minutter i 6.
Okay, altså.
Så det er også lige... Havde du noget sidste, du skulle nå at spørge?
Nej.
Så jeg måske bare Do you have anything that you're thinking that we should know, that you've thought of through all this conversation and the talk today?
Well, perhaps a little fun fact that I have heard, and I think that it was Ture Lervad who said that. He was like, oh, those looming frames, it's not really looms. So Lervad themselves was not like, or anyway, in the last part of their company area, they didn't think of the loom frames as really looms. Yeah, I think that's like, yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's also a bit like when you meet with people, they never talk positive about them.
No.
Even though almost everybody learned to weave using such one.
And I must say I had the same. I must say I have the same. I had the same idea, and then I met Rosa, and now I'm very much into loom frames, and I also have saved an old Lervad loom frame that I have at home.
Super. Yeah. I think they need more respect.
Yes. Respect back to the loom frames.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful ending.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.